All right, so if you've got anybody in your life who has ADHD, whether it's your kid or a romantic partner or colleague, you've probably watched a few TikToks or Reels or whatever the popular social media outlet is. And it always seems like they have some quirky disposition, talking about the something shiny syndrome or being easily distracted, or they have so many things started but never anything finished. And this isn't to knock any of those creators, they certainly do have merit, but I think a lot of times they sort of just gloss over the issues that ADHD or any sort of neurodivergence really causes in a person's life. Now, sometimes it actually does result in some absolutely hilarious outcomes, but nobody really seems to ever discuss just how immensely disruptive it is to a person's life. Now, I do want to preface by saying that I am not a mental health professional. In fact, I've been retired from the Army now for about 7 years. I started my career as a tank crewman, did that for a few years, reclassed, became a medic, and that's what I did for the remainder of my Army career. And after that, I went on to get my undergrad in economics, and now I'm working on a master's in software engineering. So as somebody who's approaching 45 years of age, you can see how that might be somewhat problematic. I didn't start and finish my undergraduate degree after I retired, by the way. I actually started it before I ever enlisted, and it changed so many times over the course of completing it that I was basically told by the University of Texas at San Antonio that it was either finish in econ or bust the credit cap that FAFSA would allow, or at least in Texas. I'm not sure if it's different in other states. But my master's, like, that has nothing to do with economics. Well, you could argue a combination of business and policy related degree along with engineering would probably do well in an advancing career, but it's also a career that I have zero work experience in because my whole history was primarily in the medical field, and even then I didn't do that the whole time. But this is just one of the ways that ADHD can impact a person's life. It's that sort of lack of focus on just one specialization that yeah, it really depends what you're going to do later on in life. Now, for work, I have worked since I retired. I was a general manager for Wendy's for a while, and that was pretty awesome. But it's those hours. You spend so much time at work that you don't have time for family. And, I've got kids. So I had to do something else. So I did substitute teaching for a while. It's that I'm not going to go back to, and it wasn't because of the kids. I mean, the kids are actually not as bad as I was led to believe they'd be. It's just the pay is garbage. Like I cannot work that cheaply, at least not in support of family. But see, I did get into personal training for a while, so I did get my NASM CPT. That if you're going to be really good in the personal training field, you have to have a sort of charming personality that you have to be basically a salesman, and I didn't have that kind of surface level charm, so I couldn't stick with it. But that's just kind of what goes on behind the curtains of the ADHD mind. So the short form videos out there, they don't really dig into just how severely a person's life can be derailed, especially if they don't get diagnosed or treated early. So for me, my own diagnosis didn't come until much later in life. It probably was about a year and a half ago. I've gone to see my doctor. She's taken my history, noted that I had a history of major depressive disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, and all the other disorders that are pretty common with a military career as long as mine was. And she's like, there's a lot of overlap between these diagnoses and ADHD, so let's get that checked out. And so that's what we did. It's things like being a kid and always being the first to raise your hand to answer teachers' questions, but still your grades are pretty average. It's being everybody telling you how smart you are, and you're like, you're smart, but then your grades aren't reflecting that. You're barely getting by. You're getting overwhelmed. You're just making these same careless mistakes over and over and over again. And it affects the way that you interact with others. Most of the videos I've seen, they might do something like showing a person talking normally, then the ADHD person just suddenly walks off to do something else. Or it might showcase them excitedly going on and on about some topic that fascinates them, but not the other person. Now imagine you're in this scenario. You're with someone with ADHD, a friend or a romantic partner, and you're trying to communicate something to them that might be very important to you. But instead of participating in that conversation, they walk off and they do something else. So you're a parent, and your child just never seems to be able to do the most basic of their chores. Or you told your spouse they need to pick up something from the store, but they come home with everything but the thing that you sent them out for. And for most anybody, these scenarios are extremely frustrating. But now just imagine how it feels for the person who's trying to show that they care, that has an internal monologue that's going on so much that it drowns out the conversation that they're taking part in. Or imagine being that child who's doing their best to make you proud, and they're not going out of their way to disrespect you, but it seems to be like the only thing they do. Or how stressful it can be when you're the person who's at the store and you've got this mountain of tasks that you've got to tackle. That you're trying to prepare for all these different jobs that you've got going on. But the thing that you actually went to the store for ended up getting crowded out by that thing. And as soon as you get back, it's just going to start an argument. Nobody wants that. Nobody's setting out to be disrespectful, but this is just what's going on with that ADHD, where it's derailing you, where you're not able to make your bed and pick up your clothes and put away your laundry, or you're not bringing home the right groceries when instead you've come over for like all the stuff you need to repair the fence. Imagine living a life where you're just doing the best that you can, but you're constantly coming up short, and you're getting in trouble at home, at school, and work because you just can't stay on task. I hear people talk about things like structure and routine. But what happens when that structure and routine cause you to feel trapped in this like Groundhog's Day style loop, and the chaos caused by your own ability to stay on task alienates you from your friends and family alike? Just imagine how stressful it is having to rely on deadline panic to get anything done. People with ADHD, they don't choose that. For me, it wasn't until I was able to start taking Adderall with a prescription that I was able to get things back on track. And even then, you're still stuck because you get that tolerance builds up anytime, just like with any medication. So from the scientific perspective, I think it's like 20 milligrams is like the max. Beyond that, there's no therapeutic benefit. So you kind of have to take a couple weeks off so you can be able to get that effect again. It's just like with caffeine. Talk about people, drink caffeine to go to sleep. That's just because you built up that much of a tolerance to it. But if you go a month with no caffeine and you're not an ADHD person, it'll start affecting you again. And I could go on and on about just how stressful it can be, but I think a lot of people they need to understand that your ADHD spouse, your ADHD friend, your ADHD child, they're not going out of their way to piss you off. You might be getting frustrated, but imagine how it feels for that person with ADHD to be trying to do the best that they can, to be the best person that they can be, and instead they're just constantly upsetting everybody around them just because they can't focus. I think that's about it for now. I think this video is going on, probably rambling for about 9-10 minutes now. I tried to keep it short, even set myself a timer, which you probably heard go off. But yeah, if you guys have any questions, comments, complaints, or whatever like that, by all means leave them in the comments section. I don't know if I'm going to keep going with stuff like videos like this. I know I kind of bounce around from topic to topic, and I don't really get to upload content as regularly as I would like. I do want to get better about that though. So I'll probably just keep doing like these sort of like, I guess, vlog sort of format videos, and just kind of talk about whatever's on my mind at the time, and just but obviously I'm not monetized or sponsored or anything like that. So we're plenty of opportunity. If you guys have anything that y'all want to talk about, or that you would like to get my input on, by all means, just let me know. Thanks.